Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. It's me, Jay Hersko, back again. I know it's been a minute, but here we are, and here is another exciting episode. So this week we're going to do something a little bit different. It's going to be me solo. And what I want to talk about this week is, and I don't know how agile this is, and probably more agile adjacent, but I want to talk about cathedrals, right? So when I say the word cathedral, I'm sure many of you had a lot of different things pop in your head. Probably it was something along the lines of a church, right? Or a place of worship, maybe a big building with minarets and all those things across the top. Well, when I think of a cathedral, I think of the two most famous examples of a cathedral, which is the Notre Dame and the Sagrada Familia in Spain, which is a beautiful, beautiful building. So when I talk about cathedrals, what does this idea have in common? What does the Sagrada Familia and Notre Dame de Paris, what do they have in common? Well, the first thing they have in common is they come from a shared idea. So both of these cathedrals came from ideas in Catholicism. So Notre Dame, in case you didn't know, was built as a tribute to the Virgin Mary. And the Sagrada Familia was originally inspired by I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, the Basilica della Santa Casa in Loreto, Italy. So regardless of religion, the genesis of both these buildings came from a shared idea, the idea being Catholicism. And that shared idea is the seed that bore the fruit of those giant buildings, these enormous structures, right? And the other thing about this shared idea is it was shared by tons of people, regardless of where they were located geographically, regardless of what their family history is, and to be quite honest, regardless of what time they're alive, there are still people today going to these two famous buildings to view and see them, Catholic or not, right? So there's a unique nexus there of a shared idea. The other thing when it comes to a cathedral is they typically have a sense of higher purpose, or I should say they always have a sense of higher purpose. Both of these buildings, right? Catholicism, they were built with Catholicism as the backbone. That was what they were built in mind, but they were honestly built to serve a higher purpose, which is God. Now, regardless of your personal outlook, regardless of your religion, of your faith, of your belief, that's irrelevant right now because I'd like to take a moment to appreciate the pure chutzpah it takes to say, I'm going to spend my life, I'm going to spend my money, my time, my available mind space serving a purpose that I'm never going to get some concrete feedback that I was successful or not. Now that is open for debate. Maybe God did come down and talk to Antonio Gaudi about Sagrada Familia. We'll never know. But again, it's the leap of faith that goes with the belief in the higher purpose to serve something bigger than us, bigger than ourselves. So we've got a shared idea. We've got the sense of a higher purpose. But another thing to think about is these two things, these two cathedrals, they outlived their original creator. The person or persons who came up with this idea, it far outlived them. Notre Dame took over a century, or just under a century to be built. The Sagrada Familia, famously, it started in 1882 and it's still being built. So think about that. The two people who had this sense of higher purpose and they had this shared idea took a leap of faith and said, we're going to start building this thing. And I may never see it be done, but there is a higher purpose there. And I have belief that I'm going to start these things anyway, and they're going to be successful. And to be honest, at this point, I'm reminded of that old Greek proverb, a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit. So again, serving a higher purpose, building something that's going to outlive me or you or us, and it's a shared vision from a bunch of people. And the last thing when I think about a cathedral, I think about how beautiful they actually are. Again, regardless of your faith, regardless of your beliefs, these are buildings that you can't help but look at them with a sense of awe. The Sagrada Familia, the interior pictures of the ceiling, or the level of design and intricacy, and they're honestly beautiful. They are amazingly beautiful. It's impressive to look at. Again, regardless of faith, regardless of belief, it's impossible to look at these things and not appreciate the inner beauty that's resonant in there. This is mankind at its most perfect intention, trying to recreate the beauty of nature in the service to a higher purpose. So we have these buildings, these cathedrals, right? And I think you can, most of you are probably understanding where I'm going with this metaphor, but stay along with me on the journey. So we have these things that are beautiful. They've outlived their original creator. They serve a sense of higher purpose, and they're spawned from a shared idea. Okay, so you have this giant cathedral that we're trying to build. So this idea, this metaphor popped in my head because lately I was digging down the content rabbit hole. Everybody who's listened to the show more than once knows that I'm kind of interesting in where my brain goes. And I came across two podcasts that made me put things in perspective. I came across an episode of the Triggernometry podcast, which I think everybody should listen to. It was titled Why They Have a Crisis of Meaning, Why We Have a Crisis of Meaning, with Stephen Blackwood as the guest. And he talks about the idea of the meaning crisis that's developing in the Western world, right? What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of existence? What is the meaning of us? Uh, Also, along those same lines, I listened to I think it was over 3 hours, a conversation with John Vervaeke, Ian McGilchrist, and Daniel Schmachtenberger. And it's all about there's the psychological drivers of the meta crisis, right? So the bigger crisis of existence that's inflicting all of us. And maybe this is a crisis truly spawned by the internet. One will never know. But again, it's hard to not look around and understand or even observe that there are some people that are struggling with what am I doing and where am I going? What purpose do I serve? You know, it's Douglas Adams right, and it really is just 42. Well, we'll never know. Um, I really think when I was taking a moment, a quiet moment where my head does get quiet occasionally, to step back and review these ideas, I really think it comes down to these problems, this meta crisis, this meaning crisis, right? We have lost a sense of cohesion societally. We've lost the ties that bind, that make us who we are. So if we think back to I am a Gen Xer, late Gen Xer. If we think back to my parents' generation, the boomer generation, before that, the silent generation, the social cohesion was driven primarily by two things, and it was church and family. And these were the unintentional glue that held together our society as it developed. And by our society, I mean humanity, right? Because regardless of faith, the acknowledgement of a large family, this is a concept that in human history goes all over the globe, right? And even church. I mean, church is typically referred to something along the lines of Christianity and or Catholicism, synagogue, mosque, what have you, right? The idea of a serving a bigger purpose, serving a higher power. So if we look back through history, these are the two of the things that kept us glued together, kept us connected, kept society running. So think about it. If you back in the 50s, 60s, if you relocated to a new city, a new state, be through to work or through whatever consequence, one of the first things you did to seek out people of like mind and to build your sense in a community was you found your local church. You found a denomination that was shared with your belief set. Or you found the public goods groups like the Kiwanis or the Rotarians or the American Legion. I'm not even sure any of those things exist anymore. But back to my point, the idea of shared belief structure and the idea of a family, that was our glue, right? And somehow through the fallacy of Chesterton's fence, we have allowed these ideas to fall by the wayside. So for example, I'll start with Nietzsche. Nietzsche famously said God is dead. And I actually think unfortunately we listen to him. And we have, as a whole, as society, replaced the worship of God with the worship of ourselves. We've looked inwards instead of looking outwards. And again, this is just Jay's mental ramblings and observation. Thank you to Andy Cleft for letting me fill this empty podcast slot. But I think we have turned so far inward that we don't look outwards anymore. And I'm painting with a very broad brush. I'm not saying everyone's like this, but I think it's not difficult to acknowledge it when you look across the social landscape that is our modern world. So we have lost faith. We have a lack of faith, a lack of belief in something bigger than ourselves. And we've also lost the idea of family. Over time, the idea of whether you believe in the idea of a nuclear family or not, the idea of family and connectivity has degraded. And I don't think that's even up for debate. If you look at some Eastern cultures, right? Multi-generational households are just a normal thing. Even some stuff on our side of the world, in Southern America, Latin America, The idea of big families all living together, that's kind of normal. The expectation is you support each other. It takes a village to raise children. Um, I think those ideas have kind of sadly fallen by the side. And that big family, that creates ties that bind. It creates relationships. And when we don't have that tie to our family and we don't have that tie to our faith, I really believe as humans we have a hole. We've created a hole. And out of that hole, we've filled it with different beliefs that, while not explicitly called religion, they function as religion, right? We fill them with the idea of a false online community, right? False selfishness, right? False, what Rob Henderson calls luxury beliefs. We have a hole in our existence that's missing due to our loss of faith, due to our loss of connectivity, and we filled that with things that honestly are probably not the best things for us mentally, not the best things for us emotionally and or physically. And I think if left to its own devices, we're going to find ourselves in a really kind of gnarly place. So, with all this doom and gloom being said, come on, Jay, you can't end on that note. So, let's talk about, well, how do we change this? Well, change comes from within, and change starts from each one of us. So, I would ask that anyone listening to this podcast, if you've made it this far, take a moment. Take a moment to think about the fact that you are on an amazing journey. We're all on an amazing journey, sometimes together, sometimes more connected than others, and sometimes alone. But at the end of the day, we're on an amazing journey. We have a purpose. We all have a positive purpose, and we share that purpose with others. And I truly believe that in order for us to continue growing, but to also transcend and become the best instantiation of what we truly are, the best, I don't know, manifestation of not only humanity, but our own selves. We need to find things that are bigger than us. And we need to work to collaborate to build those things that are bigger than us, that they outlive us, that they come from our shared belief set. And most importantly, that thing is beautiful. So what I'm saying to everyone who's listening is build your own cathedral.